As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have an important returning guest tonight. Rob Kirby, founder of KirbyAnalytics.com, a proprietary analyst, is here with us on Reluctant Preppers to give us his insight into international and national economics, politics, and financial scene. Rob, thank you for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Pleasure to be with you again, Dunnigan.
In the past, we've talked quite a bit about what you call the epic battle of globalism versus sovereign states, and we've led the whole way up to this buildup of the election of Donald Trump, and it seems against all odds he's been able to overcome the forces that were arrayed against him and to take the actual presidency in the U.S. now for a couple days. And if you could just give us first your insight into what you saw playing out in the actual lead up to his victory, and then now what you see from your vantage point in the research that you do on what the actions you see him starting to take and what you think impact that's going to have.
Well, Dunnigan, first and foremost, I view President Trump's ascendancy as absolutely stunning. As Gerald Celente has said recently, post-election, Trump's win has been miraculous from the standpoint that he beat everybody. He didn't just beat the globalists, he beat the bankers, he beat the Clintons, he beat the Bushes, he beat Hollywood, he beat academia, and he beat the media. And he laid waste to all of them, their best efforts to derail his candidacy and his legitimacy. And now what we've seen since his swearing in on Friday, we've seen action on the Affordable Care Act, which makes about as much sense as as Homeland Security or the Patriot Act, as I refer to it as the Unpatriot Act. We've seen action on the pipeline issue, which is something that's talked about in amazing depth and detail in my country, in Canada, with the signing of executive orders clearing the way for the Keystone Pipeline to be built to allow Alberta oil to travel down to the Gulf Coast. And no doubt he will encounter a lot of tree huggers and the environmentalists as they try to move through to the permitting stage of that. But he's taking very, very bold action. And I'll tell you what I find absolutely refreshing and quite amazing. For the first time in, I don't know, maybe 20 years at least, probably dating back at least to the Reagan era, America has a leader who's championing the American cause and seems to have the American citizen in his in his thoughts, because that seems to be what's dictating his moves. And I can honestly say it must be quite a refreshing and invigorating time to be an American and to wake up and to see the actions, in such a very short period of time. It just seems to me that he's going after this with stunning, a stunning demeanor and determination. And he still doesn't even have his entire cabinet approved yet. But I mean, it seems to be full speed ahead, and no doubt he's gonna run into some speed bumps along the way. But it sure is refreshing to see somebody take such decisive action.
It's throughout his candidacy, we mentioned about an array of forces being spread out against him. I mean, there was there was the first it was, well, he can't be a serious candidate. He's just a joke. He's just a color commentary on the side. And then actually, when he could not be denied that he was a serious contender, then it was like, well, he's a distasteful, objectionable, pariah. And it's like, well, actually, he's going to win the nomination. All of a sudden, even his own party had to flip around and start supporting him because he was just basically pulling the rug out from underneath them by his popular support. And then after he got the nomination, there's the whole thing about delegitimizing through false polls, and then when the polls showed in the actual voting showed that he had a popularity he had, then they were talking about recounts, and after they're talking about recount, then finally what was the last thing was martial law should be imposed to prevent him from taking office, and now in between there was the Russians stole the elections, and now that he's in office, it seems that he's having to continually to outmaneuver. Because one of the things people have warned that he could be stopped by the most is by the inertia of the vested interest that can grind anybody to a halt in Washington. But it seems like he's making fast moves, as you mentioned, bypassing the media, tweeting directly to the public, and just taking direct actions that. And you talk to people. There's a hot and cold. Depending who you're talking to, but in the middle of the country where we live, most of the people we talk to seem to be actually quite inspired and actually guardedly optimistic that this could finally be someone who's actually going to do what they said they were going to do. And I know that some people do hand-wringing about that, but it seems that there is the over-representation on the part of the Hollywood elite and the media that have more than their share of the microphone that are doing the hand wringing, and people who are influenced by that following suit. But when you really get down to it, a lot of these just almost baffling accusations of he's focusing too much on American exceptionalism, America first, or national interest, and that sort of thing. It's like you're actually criticizing the leader of a country for wanting the best for his country. It's almost beyond belief. But
no, to be honest with you, Dunnigan, I find it quite inspiring what Trump is doing, and in such a very short period of time. And this is something that's been, I don't know, in my view, long overdue. And how effective Mr. Trump has been, or President Trump has been, is probably best illustrated or summed up by the reaction or the speech given by Joe Biden at the Davos meeting just days ago, last week, where he literally almost in a raise the white flag speech started talking about how the globalist movement has been. I would rather guess, in my view anyway, irreparably damaged. And we also had headlines in our media saying that China was going to Davos. The leader of China was going to Davos to champion the globalist cause. Well, I think the globalist cause is probably at very best at this point doing a retreat. So I find this very refreshing, because at the root of this whole globalist movement, as we've talked about in the past, this globalist movement that we refer to is eugenics based. These are people, the group collectively known as the globalists, are people who think that mankind is destroying the planet, and these are people that wish the population of the planet to be reduced from 7 billion down to 500 million. And these are the people that have brought us things like GMO foods, and that's all part of their eugenics program to effectively sterilize us and or dumb us down and reduce fertility rates. You see, and that's the whole eugenics approach to the global program to reduce the Earth's population. They either do it through war or they do it through pharma by rendering us sterile. And this has been a long practiced and well thought out program of these people. And the globalists, once again, to put brackets around them, these are the people, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the old banking families, and in the modern day, the acolytes carrying out their work are the names like Maurice Strong, Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Nazi collaborator George Soros. And it's so nice. It's so nice to see the wickedness of these people with their contempt for humanity to encounter something as vibrant and as I don't know. Like I can't help but get the vibe that Trump loves people. Trump loves people and wants to see people do better. And, I believe he takes that from and has a sincere appreciation because he was made a very wealthy man by free markets in America. And he's pretty much accomplished about all any human being could accomplish for themselves. And I truly believe the man is now of the mind that he wants to give back. Because to be honest with you, I'm amazed that he would take the job, because this is a job, in my view, that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of upside for somebody at his age with his means. Why he didn't just ride off into the sunset, and it just seems to me he's answering to a higher power, and it's amazing, quite frankly, to sit back and just soak it up.
One quote that he said in his inaugural address stuck out to me, and he said something, I might not perfectly capture this, but when you truly embrace patriotism, there is no room for prejudice. And at first that seems like, well, what is that? Because people who've been accusing him of being racist and xenophobic and prejudicial and bigoted and so on by saying he wants to put limits on immigration to the country and remove people who have violent criminal backgrounds, etc. But you hear that and it echoes something that you just said about his true love for people. He both truly wants what is best for our country, and he recognizes and respects and acknowledges every other leader of other countries to do the same for their countries, and that vibrancy that you described is part of the vitality of standing up and being a vigorous living organism, and your country is another can be vigorously alive and doing its very best for itself. And I think that I just appreciate you having alerted us months and months ago to how this is part of a much grander drama playing out, and I think you're right in that when we see the array of forces that have come up against him, it's like you must be pushing a button, because if everybody's rising up against you, all these elite who have clearly made a mess of things, maybe you're actually gonna shake up the cage and really get something done. So there's a lot of people that are quite hopeful here in the States, looking for the improvements that can come from this. I wonder if you could bring it for us to the individual, both how this plays out. If you see what you see already, what do you believe that Trump is going to do going forward in broad strokes, and what do you think the real impact of that will be? If you could maybe look at it economically, if you can look at it some of the health of markets, health of the currencies, health of the real ability to. Is there any chance of getting to a point where we can pay off debt? Is there any chance that there's a way that we can come out with a soft landing here, where we won't end up with a catastrophic end to things? How do you see things playing out going forward?
Well, while I'm optimistic and encouraged by the early signs of what President Trump is doing, I'm also a realist in that a lot of the programs that he has on the docket right now entail massive fiscal stimulus and spending which is going to mean deficits going forward, at least in the near term, that are going to be rather extraordinary. And what I'm having trouble grappling with is where the appetite's going to come from for the new debt that's going to have to be raised, and how it's going to be raised, because America's two biggest traditional financiers, being China and Japan, have been increasingly showing that they don't have appetite for more U.S. debt. And I mean, numbers released last week by the U.S. Treasury indicate that China has, reduced their holdings of U.S. government debt by a record amount since last May, to the tune of $195 billion worth. Japan, since last July, they've reduced U.S. Debt holdings to the tune of $66 billion. And the interesting thing I would add to that is, as I read an article today that was written clearly by somebody of the anti-Trump ilk, who tried to be dismissive of the notion that China and Japan weren't buying as much American debt. And they made a statement that, well, Europe is the ones buying the American debt, and they were basically trying to suggest that Europe will pick up the slack. Well, the third largest holder of U.S. government securities in their reserve account just happens to be Ireland, and Ireland is a country of 6 million people. They have a GDP of $240 billion roughly, and they have U.S. debt U.S. debt holdings in their reserve account of $275 billion. So they've got well in excess of their GDP held in U.S. government securities in their foreign reserve account. That's preposterous to begin with, and the notion or the suggestion that entities like this, or the UK, whose sovereign finances are a disgrace also, the notion that or Italy or France, these countries are all close to, if not insolvent now, with a governor of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, who's been printing money and expanding the ECB's balance sheet like at an unprecedented clip. The notion that they can continue to finance and support a new round of American spending is in my honest belief, it's a dog that doesn't hunt, and it won't happen. So where does that leave us? That, to me, spells that the U.S. Treasury, in cahoots with the Federal Reserve, will be forced into another round of QE, or monetization of U.S. debt, which to me means that somewhere down the road here, we are going to experience some inflation. And I do believe that the inflation that we're going to experience is going to be rather stiff. And there's a lot of people, maybe above my pay grade, who thinks that it's quite possible we could even tip into a hyperinflationary environment very quickly. So, there are some seriously difficult challenges ahead. But at the end of the day, I guess I'd rather see Americans working and than not working. Because the program that President Trump has indicated he's going to be on is going to at least put Americans back to work. And whether they're going to be working for diminished dollars or not, because I believe they are going to be working for diminished dollars, or dollars that don't buy as much as they previously did. I think that is pretty much written into the way forward. And how we deal with this on a go-forward basis could be tricky, and it's going to be it's a sticky wicket. But this is what happens when you mismanage and exercise poor stewardship of a currency, and particularly when that currency happens to be the world's reserve currency. It can create very big issues, and we're going to surely be facing some in the very near future.
On that theme of it's better to have your population working than not, I actually heard an interesting perspective today about Chinese oversupply. We've heard for more than a year now way more than a year, that the Chinese have industry after industry have just created this wall of supply way beyond their ability to consume it, whether it was in steel, whether it was in concrete, whether it's in solar, electronics, and so on. And that causes just people then turn to it and say it's dumping of those on the world market when they can't absorb that supply internally, and they expect the world to then to buy it, and they'll just make the price lower and lower. Some people see that as shrewd positioning yourself, basically buying out incumbency in the market and buying market share. Other people say no, they're just solving for full employment at home, because the alternative to when you have rampant unemployment in a country like China is civil unrest and this huge imbalanced population of more males than females, and you got all these unemployed males. You end up with revolutionary thoughts going on. So it's less expensive. It's actually the cheapest unemployment program you can have is to just provide employment. Do you see things that way, that going forward, Trump full employment through large infrastructure programs and that kind of thing, it just becomes basically a large-scale unemployment program in the form of at least putting people to work and building out your country's infrastructure?
My honest guess is, at this point, we're very likely to see a spending war. I'm going to call it a spending war. Other people would say it's a race in currency devaluation. It's often cliched or referred to as a race to the bottom with currency. But I do believe that China will try to spend or outspend Trump's plans, and Trump will then double down and increase his spending. But I mean, ultimately, Don, again, I think what we're headed for in the very, very near future now, in the immediate future, I think we're looking at monetization of debt, because a lot of new debt is going to be created to put forward the aggressive fiscal programs that Trump has on the board, and he's also been very, very vocal about his unwillingness to have call it unfair trade relationships with anybody. And I would suggest that is aimed probably more at China than anyone else, and which is going to leave China trying to probably undermine their own currency to grab a bigger share of trade on the world stage, even if it's not with America. So we're going to have, in my view anyway, we're going to have competing devaluations, and this war. This currency war is going to escalate, and it could escalate quite dramatically. And if it isn't handled right, it could very easily end up in hostile military conflict.
How would you see that playing out? I mean, both countries trying to devalue their currency, outspend each other. United States putting up protective tariffs to prevent import of Chinese goods. China then turning around and saying to the rest of the world, well, we're going to devalue our currency so that our goods look more attractive to the rest of the world. How does that drive the kind of tensions that would flare up as military action?
Well, I mean, if you look back at the the cause of or America's entry into the Second World War, with Japan attacking Pearl Harbor, the history on this is pretty well known, that America basically placed an embargo on Japan and stopped selling them oil. And without oil, Japan was in a very, very difficult spot. They basically put Japan in a spot where they had to and were forced to attack. And they created effectively, it was an engineered event to ultimately to get America in the war. And this was an aim of the globalists back then. And isn't it amazing that, bringing it up to relatively modern time, a lot of people have referred to 9/11 as the new Pearl Harbor, which ushered in a litany of let's just say reduction of civil liberties, the rise of the police state, the degradation of freedoms that people in the Western world have come to expect and believe were their inalienable rights. And it's amazing how quickly these were all harvested. And if you look at it, it's all been done really in the name of this globalist pursuit. So whether we get vectored back, whether the globalists or the people in control of the economy can make things so difficult that and create conditions so difficult for Trump that he loses his base of support, and if they're ever able to shunt him off to the side, we could be right back into the stew pot with the globalists calling the shots. So I think the way forward, the next year or two, or even maybe the next 6 months to a year, could be some very, very telling times as to where we're going to be 5-10 years from now. So I hope and pray that he's able to keep the train on the tracks, and I wish him Godspeed.
Again, in your research of risks that are present in the current economy, we talked here about currencies, and you mentioned the world reserve currency. There's been some talk that Trump actually philosophically favors a gold-backed currency. Do you know if there's any truth behind that? And what reality do you think will potentially play out regarding the role of precious metals in our currency going forward?
Well, I would say this: if Trump really is a fan of a gold standard, or gold as money, as he's been purported to be, I would think that actions such as a full and honest, transparent audit of the U.S. gold reserve would be a signal that he's very serious in that direction. But short of that, I've been actually paying a lot of attention recently to the rise and the trading of Bitcoin, because I've become a believer in the blockchain technology and protocol as a means to store and convey wealth, and it's actually in terms of a means to convey things of value or wealth. It's the inherent in the blockchain technology is a lot more than just a currency or its use as currency. The one thing I will say that makes me a little bit reluctant to outright endorse anything crypto is my firm belief that there is such a thing as an internet kill switch, and anything that is crypto and anything that is housed on the internet, in my view, can be turned off. And if you get a little punch drunk and get a little bit too much of your wealth tied up in anything of a crypto nature, my feeling is it could be erased in an instant. and from that standpoint, it bothers me. But what I find sort of I'm gonna call it, it's a bit of a perplexing, it almost flies in the face of rationality that a cryptocurrency that does not exist in real form anywhere, but through algorithmic application cannot be sold unless you own it. Like there is no optionality on Bitcoin. You cannot sell Bitcoin short if you don't own Bitcoin. There are exchanges where you can buy Bitcoin on margin, but you can only buy Bitcoin that exists. You cannot sell a Bitcoin that does not exist. And, but then on the other side of it, you've got the precious metals, which are extremely finite, like Bitcoin, and need to be mined out of the earth at great expense and effort. But these precious metals can be sold in infinite amounts, in amounts that do not exist in the real world. And I find it sort of it's sort of a perplexing dichotomy that something that's real, that needs to be mined out of the earth, can be sold in infinite amounts that will never exist, because we have regulators that don't do their jobs. But then on the other hand, we have something crypto that doesn't exist in real form anywhere, that you can't sell unless you own it. And as such, and this is the part that makes me sit up and take note of Bitcoin, in that because you can't sell Bitcoin that doesn't exist, it behaves more like an actual free market than the metals, which are real. And it almost seems like it's upside down from what it should be. That something that's real and physical can be sold in infinite amounts, and something that doesn't exist anywhere in physical form, you got to own it before you can sell it. and that just seems upside down to me, the way I think. But the aspect of it being a free market because of those qualities tells me that and this runs against everything that I say regarding technical analysis. I think technical analysis might have more relevance in the Bitcoin market than it has in 30 or 40 years in the metals market.
Sure.
Because technical analysis, I fundamentally believe in the power of technical analysis. I just don't believe it works in a market where your inputs are contrived. Because, what are you charting? You're charting a fraud. And how you can get honest direction from fraudulent inputs is above and beyond my ability to understand. But I view the inputs or the price mechanism and the price points that we see in Bitcoin, they're more real than anything that goes on in the metals market. So anyway, it's interesting, the dichotomy between the two. And it just seems to me that, look, more than anything, the rise of Bitcoin just reinforces the notion that the world is not accepting the status quo. They're not happy with the functionality of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, which is why there's so much effort being put into creating something that's a viable alternative. And whether Bitcoin ultimately ends up being it or not, it's almost irrelevant. But what it does show is that tremendous amount of time and effort is being spent to find an alternative, because fiat currencies have shelf lives. and our current fiat currency regime is very long in the tooth.
Back on that similar vein, you mentioned a possible audit of gold reserves. What about, do you believe we will have an audit of the Fed under Trump administration?
I don't even know that an audit of the Fed would be necessary. And I think that, in all honesty, I think that Trump would probably run into an enormous amount of backlash and headwind if he tries to pursue that. But as the president of the United States, to have his the U.S. gold reserve is certainly within his ability to sign an executive, I would imagine anyway, to sign an executive order saying that there's going to be a very, very extensive and thorough, transparent audit of the sovereign U.S. gold reserve. And I think if that were to be undertaken, I think a complete horror story would be revealed that America quite possibly doesn't have any gold. So, I mean, there's a part of this that you could even say, be careful what you wish for. But I mean, if America's gold has been plundered and stolen, maybe America would be best to deal with it and to know and for the people to know, because if anything would put the icing on the cake for the globalists for the rest of eternity, would be revelations that these human-loving globalists have actually ransacked and looted the American gold reserve, and that it's gone. And my attitude towards that is let the chips fall where the chips fall.
Do you think that the people would understand? You mentioned that there'd be this revelation, but who is going to connect it back to these globalists? I mean, you do, because you've been doing this analysis, and people who've been subscribing to you do, but do you think the common man, I mean, actually, you have pointed out that in Trump's speeches, he does put the finger right on the globalists and say he has talked about these global trade agreements, and it's one of the actions he's already taken in the first 2 days is taking steps to get us out of the TPP. But do you think that the common person would understand that just because the U.S. doesn't have gold, that means that it was mismanaged by globalist forces? Do you think that would actually cause a mind shift?
Well, yes, and because I truly believe. I mean, you asked a little bit earlier what my thoughts would be, or the likelihood of Trump ordering an audit of the Fed. If we found out that the gold was in fact gone, I think people would be very quick to label the Fed as the perpetrator or the facilitator of the removal of the gold, which in essence would bring down in my view anyway, would probably bring down the curtain on central banking, probably globally, because it would probably lead to audits in other nations. And I mean, my research over the years has told me that central banks around the world have been practicing, let's just call it what it is, fraudulent accounting with regards to their gold reserves, where they count gold that has left the vault because it's been leased, is still counted on the same line as any gold that might be present in the vault. And in this manner, gold reserves around the world have been double counted for a great many years, and which has left the whole structure of the gold market as a very, very opaque and murky picture in terms of how much gold is there really in the world, and who owns it, and how many times over has it been sold or been subscribed to. And these are things in my view that are required before we get back to any sort of a monetary regime or currency regime that people will actually have faith in. Because dishonest money, it does not engender good international relationships or honest commerce. And if the world's situation is to be righted, I think we need to have honest honest commerce, honest money, and honest commerce. And fraudulent. I mean, this is even talked about in the Bible. I mean, the Bible espouses that you got to have honest weights and measures, or you're going to have big problems. Well, I'll tell you what. Our world's been operating for a lot of years with dishonest money, dishonest weights and measures, and it's not really a big wonder why the world's in the mess that it is, with conflict all over the place, because we've been using dishonest money for a very long time, and it's not good for, as I said, for international relations when you're the perpetrator or the operator of dishonest money.
We always ask this at the end: is how does this come down to the individual homeowner, the individual head of household, just trying to take care of their family, reduce risks? Most people are just overwhelmed at the thought of these huge, elite, global, mysterious powers that are beyond our grasp. You've given us always an eye-opening heads up that these forces are at play, these forces are at work, not to take things at face value. But what, again, given what we know now, and given the direction and the trend that you see developing, are some prudent steps that an individual can take to take care of business, reduce risk for their individual family?
Well done again. As we've said at the conclusion every time we've ever spoken, and as your namesake, Reluctant Preppers, implies, you're probably doing yourself a world of good if you have some of your investable assets in physical precious metal. It might be a very, very intelligent thing to own some storable food, and it might also be intelligent to have a means to protect both of the above, or both of those two underscored things. And I would suggest more than ever going forward, this is just a prudent course of action, to ensure that you're at least going to have a fighting chance to weather what, in my mind and in my view, is absolutely guaranteed to come. Anyway, we got tough times ahead of us. We have tough times ahead of us, and you know what? And that's with Trump doing. That's even with Trump doing great work. We have tough times, and you know what? And frankly, a speedy audit of the U.S. gold reserve, in my view, would cement his. It would cement his position. And it would also open up the floodgates for him to start rounding people up, because I think these roundups have to come.
That's the other thing, is the sooner that would happen, the more obvious it would be to everyone that this happened when he wasn't minding the store. This was happened before. Yeah. Yeah,
and it would give him a lot of leeway to lay down the leather on a lot of these people. Because it would resonate with people. He could say, look, who's been in charge of America for the last 30 years? It's been the Bushes and the Clintons. And these are the people I tried to tell you who were engaged in bad stuff, in illegal stuff. These are the people I told you who were robbing you blind. These are the people, and you know what? And I don't know. In my view, if he was smart, he would be on that right away.
Well, we'll have to keep our eyes open for that, because it certainly seems that things are unfolding at a very rapid clip right out of the gate here. So there's certainly a chance for that.
Well, I don't know. To me, that would be a very logical thing for him to do. And because, like I say, I think it would give him a lot of room to operate if that got underway, because then the mud, like, that would actually be the shit hitting the fan. But that would also create, and could also create, a complete, you want to see gold going up $300, $400, $500 a day.
Yeah, that could be a real
silver up
crisis.
$20, $30, $40 a day. That would do it.
Yeah, it's ironic, because it would seem to a lot of people that was the start of a crisis, But actually, the crisis has been going all along. That's just when they found out about it.
Yes. Oh yeah. But I mean, hey, you know what? I think we're in a window where that sort of thing is likely now.
Well, Rob, we've always are grateful for your visits here with us here on Reluctant Preppers. And again, if people on your website, when you go to KirbyAnalytics.com, there are a number of introductory articles that really start leading off very intriguing leadoffs. And then, as we understand it, in order to get full access to that, people have the opportunity to subscribe. Can you just let people know where they can find out more?
Yeah, well, you can find me on the web at KirbyAnalytics.com. I do some written paid commentary, and there's also there's a very, very large archive in the members section, and there's a substantial amount posted on the website, available to everybody. That's pretty much it. KirbyAnalytics.com.
Thank you again, Rob, for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
It's been my pleasure, Donegan.